Please join me in welcoming CTO Steve Dertien. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. So since we're going through everybody's ages, I was born at PTC, and I'm on my 24th year, and Ron advised me at check-in that that's just rookie numbers compared to his 41, so appreciate that, Ron. I have a hard act to follow because I can't land anything on Mars, but I can help you all achieve what's awesome. And if you're to say why 24 years at PTC, and it's because no 2 days in my life are ever the same, because I get to work with all of you on the customer side, on the partner side, and even with my PTC colleagues to just transform the way that products manifest themselves in our lives. And that's kind of it. I mean, our customers rely on our technology to make your stuff awesome. And so one of my hobbies is I really only buy customers' products so that I can critique them, so that when we're in a customer visit, I can say, hey, here's what I don't like about your product. And so when you're talking about what you don't like about our products, we can be on an equal footing. But it's really genuine. And if you ask around at PTC, like, why is Jim there for 27 years? I'm sure there's entertainment in other places, and a lot of our product management and the PTC colleagues here, there's a lot of new folks and really inspiring talent and there's a lot of really seasoned people that truly understand like the problems you all have. And I would say one of the gravity aspects of what we get to do is just positive impact in the world, if you will, in your products and the way that it works, and it's intoxicating. I thought this would only be a 5-year plan, by the way. I worked in Medtronic before coming to PTC, so officially I wasn't really born there. And I had this epiphany. I was sitting, much like you in the audience in Texas, PTC user, what am I, 97, I think, 98? And I'm like, man, if the impact of PTC's products can be that profound, like I want to be kind of a part of that. And you know, I'll learn something and then go back and engineer something for real. And then realize, like, we engineer hardcore stuff. And of course, Andreas and I were talking about the intricacies of 3D printing and some geometry issues. And I mean, even the math is insane in what we do internally. And it matters. It matters because it's how you can actually design things that can land on Mars and how you can, you know, power the world with green energy. And so that's intoxicating for us. Now, the title on the slide, I changed it from the intro that's in there because there's this little bit of a moment that Jim shared with us last night, which is he's been really at the helm of the company for 27 years from a product technology perspective. You know, everything that was in there before he was CEO, and then as CEO, his hand was on every knob, dial, and everything that kind of steered the company. And now we're in a maybe our largest transition since he took over. And so in a new era of product development, little double entendre here. You know, at PTC, it's a new era of what we're doing. Not to be alarming, I'm actually super excited about where that takes us. But also like the products that we're all creating, that you're all creating. I mean, we're in a new era of things, whether it's, you know, clean energy, the stuff that's happening in automotive with how software's changing the way the world works, you name it. It's truly, truly exciting. My only commentary on this slide is from my hometown crowd, the folks from Steelcase. I noticed your name wasn't in the video. Not my fault, I didn't make it. But I did decide to put you up here just to be there. The challenge I have is with 35,000 customers, how to give everybody, you know, equal share. It's amazing when I tell stories to the many employees at PTC that are not customer facing, you know, the folks that work in finance and accounting, like what you all do, and it's profound. But what I want to focus on here is the performance of the company, as Jim kind of attested to last night. Because we're performing so well, it allows us to invest in a portfolio at levels that are kind of unthinkable, like the investment in Creo and Windchill, just to focus on that. In Creo 10, we put 127 new features in the product. In Creo 11, there's 134 on the docket. That's what we're tracking when Creo 11 kind of comes out here in the spring. Windchill 12.1 had 159, and Windchill 13 brought 164. So if you think about it, the performance of the company is allowing us to invest at amazing levels in the product. Now, we have some tough conversations. Why? Because the volume of challenges that we can actually try and address has to be met with, you know, our capacity to do it. And so just like any other company, we have to rationalize that. But it's really awesome to think about just how profound some of the advancements have been. Like the bill of material and configuration management advancements that we've gotten just by working really closely with BMW benefits everyone profoundly. Now, this is a good news, bad news slide. The good news is I have a lot to talk about. The bad news is I don't have as much time to talk about everything. So if I'm not going to cover your favorite product like Navigate or some of the things that are happening in AR, it's quite simply because our portfolio is now addressing so many needs. It's virtually impossible in 40 minutes to cover it at pretty good depth. So I'm going to hit the highlights, like what is really driving our strategy. And so PTC, we're saying, look, some of these macro forces are big. We all can talk about the evolving workforce, and it means a number of different things. People that are retiring and leaving us, transferring their knowledge, as well as acquiring new talent. And the talent that's coming out of schools are trained and capable at pretty significant levels these days. Like, they don't look like the engineers that are in our companies. I'm actually hiring an individual straight out of college that will probably make most people in that same profession. He outperforms, I would say, some of our senior developers straight out of school. Like, it's magical, but he's also mechanical, he knows simulation, like the multidisciplinary aspect of it. Why? Well, they've learned programming in grade school now. They've learned how to do, like, you don't have to explain collaboration to them. It's just native to the way they work. And so, like, some of the very things that we're doing, if you were to show it to them, they would look like us, like our systems are made by the dinosaurs. And so that's actually important to us, and I'll cover that in a minute. Supply chains. I think COVID showed us the supply chain volatility that we have. I don't think that's going away. And I think if you actually look, and I'll show you a slide here in a minute, they're so integral to what we do, yet they're not as included as they could be in the process. And so if you look where a lot of inefficiencies are, it's like, how do we get the suppliers involved more quickly and easily into the products that we're all kind of coming up with? Software-driven innovation is another one. The car makers are basically saying, so when I say car makers, think like VW and BMW and the like, are literally in a transition where they're saying, look, it was a mechanical car with a platform and some of the components had software in it, and now they're flipping that around and saying, hey, it really is a software-defined architecture and some of the hardware is along for the ride. And so all of the working methods and the way that they do releasing and managing and the scale of it is fundamentally changing the way the automotive industry thinks about how software is incorporated, and we'll talk about that some more. I don't have to get into a big conversation here. I think environmental sustainability is manifested. We would estimate 80% of it's manifested by the decisions that people in a room like this make in product development. You can't buy a Volvo truck as a diesel, put it in your garage, and then come out the other end with a hydrogen power plant without an extraordinary amount of effort. I mean, that's really sunk into the design. So if you want a transformation, or if you even want to transform how the materials are consumed, manufactured, and put into it to drive those efficiencies, it all stems from what we do in engineering. And then Jim did allude to service optimization. For many of our customers, they make as much money on servicing those assets over a 10, 20, 30, 50-year life cycle. And so managing the life cycle is super important all the way through. And you'll see us kind of bolster up a lot on what happens on that downstream, even into service, and making service more executable, if you will. Jim did allude to it last night. So he's saving me a lot of time on these slides, by the way, because he covered so much. I can just cut some content here and fit some other stuff in. But I do agree with him that SaaS is actually becoming an option for customers, especially when you look, I'll show you on the next slide here. Some of these companies that are coming to us are saying, look, we just spun out of so-and-so. Quite frankly, building IT infrastructure is not our thing. We would just like to consume the technology. And so for companies that look like that, almost always, software as a service is the way that they want to consume it. My commentary here is we're going to meet everybody kind of across the spectrum. There are customers that work in highly sensitive workloads that, quite frankly, you're going to be on-prem for a long, long time, or even in a very secure part of Azure or Amazon, and we understand that, and we'll continue to support that virtually in perpetuity. Like, I have no end in sight for that because it makes no sense to do what other companies are doing by just forcing SaaS or nothing. You start to think about the regulatory burden, the security burden, the intellectual property aspects. And yes, we can manage a lot of intellectual property and security, but there are some things that probably don't belong in PTC's portfolio, if you will, especially when you talk to our aerospace and defense customers. Yes, we do manage workloads for the Navy. Yes, we do manage, some sensitive content. But there's some stuff out there that, quite frankly, for those that watch Oppenheimer, the Department of Energy does some things, and they're going to need technology that allows them to do that. So that's just my pitch there, that anywhere where you see plus is basically the same product that you love, and with us optimizing what we're doing on SaaS. And by the way, some of the benefits that we're accruing in SaaS come back to the on-prem product, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. Things like Windchill 13 allows you to go all the way from 11 to 13 without double hop migrations. It's going to make it easier for everybody. Reducing the time to actually do upgrades is also a benefit. Now, we're going to do zero downtime upgrades on the SaaS side. That part you might not get in the on-prem, but certainly we're going to get you close to being a lot more satisfied there. So in 3 buckets, we have Arena, Onshape, and ServiceMax. They only come in SaaS. They don't come in any other flavor. That's the only way they come. That's the only way they'll ever come. The mainline products, from Flex PLM, it's based on Windchill, Creo, some of the Kepware capabilities. Now, Kepware is interesting because we're doing SaaS management, but still running Kepware in the factory because it's a critical, sensitive aspect of what makes factories work, and so on. ThingWorx and Codebeamer, if you didn't see that, we do offer ThingWorx as SaaS, but to bring it into the Plus Club is a little bit more work, and same for Codebeamer, so that's kind of underway right now. And we learned a lot, like with SaaS native of Onshape and Arena, to Jim's point yesterday, we learned like what a true SaaS product experience and operations looks like, and now we're conveying that over to what we're doing with Windchill. So it's not hosting. We're not taking the commentary would be like your mess for less. We're not taking what you have and operating it the same way. That's not effective. And so we're really going through and doing the right motions. But the customer names that are in the bottom, when I mentioned, they're either spinning out or being a startup, almost always those types of companies are choosing the advantage and the velocity of software as a service products over building IT infrastructure to support their business. And so Onshape taught us some really super interesting things, like multi-user collaboration. And again, I made the comment about students coming out of school. That's all they know. Like I have a 12-year-old, and I can't explain to him what serial collaboration looks like, because that's how drawings work. Check in, check out, one person at a time, one version. And I started to figure out the history of that. I'm going to blame it on the Egyptians first, and then I'm going to blame it on Da Vinci, then I'm going to blame it on Eli Whitney, and then Henry Ford, and ultimately we get to, there's an argument over, is it the United Kingdom in 1911 with their Secret Data Act, or is it the United States Defense Department at 1951 with the classified information? Like at some point we regulated this waterfall, and it became we're genetically disposed to it, and so that's a bottleneck that we need to kind of take a look at. And so we brought some of those superpowers from Onshape into Creo Plus, and so you're going to see that basically we now can bring multi-user collaboration. And this took a little bit for us to wrap our head around when we acquired Onshape, because it's like, how do 2 people occupy the same space, literally the same geometry space at the same time? And it taught us some tricks on how to ultimately do that and manage it. And then suddenly, if some of you see, like from the model tree in the left-hand column, there's now a branch diagram in the middle. We're now keeping track of like all the design iterations from all of the collaborators in that session. And so at any point in time, we can go back, we can go forward. Think of it like an unlimited undo list. Like you can literally branch, merge, and do things that, quite frankly, for those of us that remember ProPDM, the ProInterlink merge feature, like that was really, really difficult. And to the point that I don't think many people really institutionalized it. And now we're at a point where it's actually super slick. And so a few other features that you'll actually see, a lot of work in adding new things, like composites. The composites capability in Creo 10 and 11 is phenomenal. And for customers that are actually hardcore into a lot of composites development, that'll greatly help what's happening there. The incorporation of simulation as well. I think by shortening the cycles on bringing simulation earlier into the design, and then easing I'm going to call it the digital thread between Creo and ANSYS, just makes it more productive for everybody to have that all in there. And so we've been working hard on things like that. And again, Andreas, you reminded me yesterday, even what we're doing with generative design technology, I mean, it has to work. Like all of the additive manufacturing technology has to work with simulation. Because if the workflow is to export, work in a bunch of other tools and bring it back in, like good luck, like really understanding, how that works in your overall design. Now I mentioned something, some of you might have seen this headline where Synopsys is going to go through 12, 18 months of acquisition of ANSYS regulatory approval and stuff aside. And I figured it'd be worth a moment to say, look, that actually is not a volatile situation for anybody. I mean, the moment that announcement went out, just so you all know, I get these emails that say, hey, do you want Ansys customer list because you should act now and go sell your simulation software to the Ansys base. And I said, don't you know that, like, it's Ansys inside, but hey, okay, that's fine. But they're literally, I'm going to use the word ambulance chasing to say, you know, they're not a viable company in this. And I'm like, that makes no sense, because what they do for all of us really represents about half their business, and there's no way Synopsys would pay a premium and then write off the part that actually makes all the profitability and revenue. Just like PTC, we would never, if a company that we acquire actually has good products in it, we'll figure out a way to sustain those products. It's actually really, really good. And so I'm just here to say, in the conversation with Ansys and the partnership and so forth, it's solid. Like, you don't have to worry about, you know, what they're going to go through with Synopsys to consider, you know, your alternatives and things like that. It's going to be a good thing. So I'll talk now about like two, what I would say, innovative strategies for customers. I'm going to talk a little bit about what agile development means. And a moment ago I mentioned the car makers are thinking about how software changes the way that they design things, which in turn says, hey, the way that our business processes actually work need to change fundamentally to kind of fit that working method. And on the other end, we're sitting on a treasure trove of data that needs to be unlocked. You could call it a digital thread. Does Lockheed still call it digital tapestry as well, or has that been vanquished? Depends on who you talk to. Yeah, but the idea of like connecting the data, automating more downstream is not gone. I mean, it is like we generate a treasure trove of data together, and you know, we want to help you plan that, design it, pass it into manufacturing, be way more efficient in the design. Why? Because at the end of the day, our bosses, the CEOs, kind of demand one simple thing from us: either more products in the market that we can sell at great quality, or more efficiency on the margin execution side. Like, it's just a kind of a balanced equation. Inside there's always quality, but everyone that I've ever talked to is like, hey, how do I actually burn down our backlog faster and more efficient? And there's a lot to be had in there. To talk about the right-hand side that Jim put up, am I out of sequence on slides here? Yeah, there we go. Is ServiceMax. So when we talk about the customers that actually operate, you know, how do you actually look at it? Well, we can use IoT to do that. We can use IoT to actually service things. But what we never really had was like the asset at the middle of it. You could put assets into ThingWorx, but to truly have an asset dispatch, service management capability, and truth be told, we wanted to acquire ServiceMax probably about 2015. When GE Digital was kind of on their kick, and they obviously paid a premium for it, and you know, now as all that stuff moves around, the opportunity opened back up, and you know, we never really shied away from it, came back to it and said that still is absolutely perfect for our portfolio. And the reason why is it allows us to put that asset at the center of things. It's at the center of the conversations we want to have with customers from a CRM perspective. You know, so even PTC, we moved a lot of our customer data out of our ERP into Salesforce. And there's actually way more happening with customers as they put their contracts and the CPQ and other functions on the sales side into the customer relationship aspect, including service. And then equally, there's a lot of product definition data that they need to have. Like when you call with a service issue, you need to get to the data to actually fix that. And so there's actually a bridge that we're intently working on. I think there's a session later today to say, okay, what are the integrations that would make the most sense, you know, to ease, you know, what's happening in service. So at this point, I'm going to kind of call a quick timeout on service and some of the other things, and really spend kind of the majority of my time on Creo, Windchill, and Codebeamer, if that's cool with everybody, just by balance of content and what we're going through. By the way, you can see we're looking at how do we integrate the rest of the portfolio into that as well. So around the periphery, you know, whether it's the Servigistics products that Jim mentioned yesterday, ArborText included, the work that we're doing in Vuforia and so forth, that will continue to round out as well. But, you know, I took a visit. Bosch, as some of you know, is a really, really great PTC customer, like many of you. And they measure a lot, as a German company should. They are very into their metrics. And one of the ones that just threw me in my seat, we can do a real fast math exercise on this, said, look, we do, as a company, about 600,000 design changes a year, which at their size makes sense, right? Because they make everything from hydraulic valves and PLCs to refrigerators to e-bikes to, I mean, they're huge. If you don't really understand their portfolio, they're a very big company. But they said, look, it's translates to about 3 to 6 million human operations to implement those changes. And it's time to kind of automate what those are. Now, if we did the fast math and said, look, on average, it's 15, let's just say 3 million operations, 15 minutes at $100 an hour. And for a prize, I don't know what the prize will be, just like the guy from NASA, we'll figure this out. Anybody got a fast number? A lot. That's not a number. We're very mathematical at PTC. It's retail math. 75 million. Now that you could say, okay, 100 is pretty high, Steve. I would say, yeah, but I'm on the low end of the ranges as well. It's actually probably more than that. I know it's more than that, I just can't tell you what that number is. So you look at it and you're like, wow, what should we do to like really try and drive more efficiency? And then the partners over at Deloitte. So I'm basically showing you one really cool thing they do for customers is what they call a value stream assessment. So you should read this chart. For those that are colorblind, I'm colorblind, I can't tell the difference. They tell me there's red lines and there's green lines in this. So I have to look at it a little bit different. But the red lines are non-value added conversations between people and departments, handovers. And the green lines are value add. So for example, if I said, hey Ron, I'm looking for a valve, it has this flow rate with these thermal properties, et cetera, can you get me the details on it because you're my supplier? Like, there's actually no value being created in that exchange. That's just an information search for me to kind of validate it. Just like I imagine at NASA when they said, hey, we're gonna put a commercial off-the-shelf camera on that lander. In my mind, I'm going, what's the shock and vibe? What's the radiation? What's the thermal characteristics? Like, I'm sure the commercial camera operator is like, who the heck, what? Like, and so that had to have been a fun supplier conversation. But you look at like the back and forth that takes, and it's an extraordinary amount of time. And so in what they're estimating here is, number one, those exchanges took a lot. And by the way, if you saw as it was growing, I can play it again in a second. The system engineering requirements gathering was all scattered and back and forth. So even the act of gathering requirements was extraordinary. But if you see the star on here, you'll see that suddenly, for whatever reason, as they're approaching production, the change rate went exponential. Like it just started to skyrocket. Like you should be more or less kind of done with your changes at that point in time, and heck, you were just barely beginning. And this is a generic one. I don't know who the customer is behind this, but I've seen many of these. And they all have similar characteristics to them. Every one of them tells a very similar story, which is, look, you need to automate more downstream processes. And if you could take advantage of model-based definition enterprise and take that data and then use it to automate downstream, we know that's a journey and that will take some time, but it's a step in the right direction. Number two is people are spending extraordinary amounts of time searching for information. Like if you look at a lot of the non-value add, I gave you 2 examples there where that was just me looking for some info of other parties. And if I had that information under visibility, we could do it. And we'll talk about generative AI and some of the opportunities that creates in here as well. The next one, they said, well, I jokingly made the comment from the Egyptians to the Department of Defense, but it's actually true. A lot of the waterfall process was codified. And all we did in the 1990s and 2000s is we took the paper-based release management workflow and we codified it digitally in workflow in Windchill. And so now the workflow is just asking you like all these extraordinary questions in an effort to try and be simple, but in fact it adds a lot of extra touch. And so like how do we actually break through the waterfall and be more in an agile mindset just like we are on the software planning side? And then last, which was a little bit obvious, I made the comment, is just we've always wanted to incorporate suppliers earlier. But here's the thing, when data is kind of trapped behind the firewall, it's a little bit difficult to get suppliers early in the process, like is it built. The Flex PLM customers have appreciated having a supplier portal for a while. And then Arena, because it's SaaS, there's actually more suppliers that use Arena than actual users from the customer side because it's used mostly in a lot of high-tech contract manufacturing applications. And so the suppliers really give them the agility and velocity to kind of plan better. And so again, we're thinking, how do we incorporate more of that? And even Creo Plus is a step in the right direction. That collaboration that I showed you is open to allow suppliers to securely work with data in a way where it's not being completely received on their end, it's being completely managed on your end. And so suddenly you can put them in the design loop in ways that you couldn't expand them into Windchill previously, just as an idea. But there's also like a balance here, and the QR code that's up here, this is a white paper that we just put out a few weeks ago, and this is based on interviews with customers. And these customers are ones that I would say are are leaning into the exemplar category, meaning they're figuring out how to drive automation opportunity at profound levels, meaning they're the earliest adopters with the greatest gains, kind of to be had. I'm going to tell you, it's not easy work. These are, between the PLM and ERP crowds, there's obviously some difference of opinions depending on customers. But if you really look at like how to drive efficiency, there's one opportunity, which is many of our customers are doing an SAP transformation or an ERP transformation while they're thinking about their digital transformation and engineering. And so that is a moment to kind of take a look at the 20 years of working methods we have and say, should our business models actually support more configurability, more adaptability, and more reuse of this data? And in my opinion, the answer is yes. Because there is data flows that we can create and integrations to really ease this. But in some cases, when we say, hey, put ERP first and then follow it around with PLM, it creates a lot of excess work. And so are there ways to kind of squeeze that out where everybody's happy? And when I say that, absolutely, the ERP folks need material data. You need to be able to purchase it. You need to be able to inventory it. You need to be able to allocate it. You need to be able to work with suppliers and do all the invoice management. There's a lot that actually happens in there, but there's a lot of stress we can take out of the system. And that stress I just equate to velocity. Back to the Deloitte chart. There's just a lot of pent-up velocity, with the back and forth. So in an effort to make this interactive, so I give, you give back, anonymously, what we're going to do, if you're all in it. So this is anonymous. You don't have to do this, but I think we're going to have a little fun. You only need to scan this code once. I checked. You can be all the way on the hallway, and I see you, and you don't have your camera out. So, we're going to, see all the way back there. You should be able to scan that code. And in a second, there's 4 surveys throughout the presentation, and you're going to see the live results. I don't know how this is going to go, and it's always sketchy to put something up if you don't know what the outcome's going to be. But I think we're going to learn something about each other here in a second. Okay, y'all ready? The QR code will come up again. So on each screen, the QR code will come back. You don't have to scan it again. Just stay in the app, and it will give you the survey each time. And so when we think about how do we prioritize making that prior chart better, I have a really complicated challenge as a technology leader in the company, which is where do I lay down my investments? Because SAP itself is a pretty sizable thing, but then I go down the list of the other ERP vendors and just, where are we at? And you're already starting to see some spread here. My guess, by the way, before this builds out is SAP probably constitute about 60% of PTC customers. They're pretty strong. But there's a balance of others. I will actually try to scroll up on this. Oops, sorry. Go back. It is self-sorting. Sorry if that screwed up your survey, folks. There it goes. Sorry. You'll see it kind of balance out, but yeah, SAP is actually growing, but there's a bunch of other ones down there too. I almost put one on there, older than I am, can't tell you what it is, because that's actually true too. There's some customers I've talked to where they're like, oh, this thing's so homegrown, it's not even commercial anymore. So I think we learned a little bit that SAP is the incumbent. I think the S/4HANA thing is a little bit surprising to me. So here's my commentary on that. If you're going through the S/4HANA conversion, are we really taking the opportunity to really figure out those workflows, to try and drive, more optimization? Or are we just cementing in 20 more years of same? And so that's a real opportunity. Okay, so to take it a step further, y'all ready? Cool. Let's do the same thing, and you may or may not know, and that's fine. But on the MES system side, it's a little bit more hectic. I didn't put other in here. There's a lot of customers that don't have an MES, probably my mistake, but we'll see what happens. Somebody's got to change that to SO number really quick. I'm not trying to influence or nothing from the stage. The Siemens thing's a little, those got to go back to the bottom. They sometimes hide out in our events, so I can imagine there's a few of you here or on the live stream. All right, so interesting, right? So a lot using SAP, a lot using Delmia, Siemens, Rockwell. Interesting, isn't it? So now when we start to say, okay, how do we drive integrations? That's helpful to me to say, in relative order, where would it go? By the way, for the PTC user folks, I'll give you the data behind it, and you can send it out to the community. So it's a little give. There'll be 2 more surveys, so just hang tight in a couple slides. So, the way that we're thinking about it is how do we take the processes that we're really good at on the Windchill side, and how do we marry those? So in blue kind of represents, like, these are the handoff areas where we really need to get it to ERP, where we really need to get it to MES. But you'll see a few things, like we want to extract, the data from the requirements. We want to have the model items from the MBD data and the CAD data. We want to convert those into control characteristics. And as we start converting it into data, we can automate our way around that data, which I sat in a session yesterday. And one of the interesting things was, well, can my control characteristic be dependent on my control characteristic because this depends on that? And it's like, suddenly now we're having a conversation around, the impact of change. So I'm going to show you just a couple quick things. When I say MBD up here, some in the audience might think, oh, yeah, I'm using the GD&T stuff in Creo. And I would say, great, that's a start. But what we really want to do is to really have a semantic understanding of the data. Which bolts are there with what torque? Because with torque, we can convert that to a control characteristic. And with that, we can have maxes and mins, and we can now drive more of the automation downstream into manufacturing. And so we really want to try and capitalize that. This, by the way, what you also saw was a table feature. So this is going to be new in Creo 11. That actually allows you to manifest tables like you would have on drawings in your annotations, and then you can actually click through and see, what are all the affected parts, and the team would call that semantic search, but basically you can find things based on those characteristics. Now this is a feature in Windchill, which is now we can take those annotations and allocate those to the process plant. So now that you've declared it in Creo, Windchill can now see them, and we can say, hey, these 5 control characteristics, or these 5 model items for the MBD perspective, are now the things that we want to see at this particular step. So Dan, when I visited Solar Turbines years ago, you guys were in the non-contact metrology side of things very early on, and now you can say, hey, at this step, these are the 7 things that you all need to focus on. And suddenly, like that automation for them would be profound. We could take hands-off keyboards in a profound way. And so let me give you another example. A customer who might be in the room but said, I would like to remain anonymous, said, look, every weld note takes 15 minutes. You might figure it out. The image is pretty accurate. Narrows it down to like 10 companies. They said, look, every weld note takes 15 minutes. And just so you know, we burn enough welding wire to circle the earth 25 times a year. Yeah, there was a wow up here. My jaw hit the floor when he said that as well. And if you imagine a piece of equipment of that size, that welding wire amasses, I think, this is rote recall now, to almost 20% of the mass of the chassis of the vehicle. Because they're just taking huge plates, huge castings, bringing them all together with massive amounts of multi-layer welding. And how do we automate that out? Because right now, somebody actually has to go and look some of the biggest drawings that are ever made and just double check that out of the 100 weld notes that are on there, like how to convert that into downstream knowledge. And it's not just like, oh, hey, here's the weld note. Where does it begin? Where does it end? All of the geometry about it so they can basically update their tools. And it's even more time if it's robotic. And so again, if you took that 3 to 6 million operations and applied it to this customer, what percentage of their time spent is really in the welding category? It's probably sizable. So in Creo, Martin, this is Creo 11, right? So to take not just MBD where you can have GD&T data presented, but even taking things like the spot welds, for example, and so you're seeing us kind of lay down some spot welds super quick. And yes, those can be MBD. Yes, you can have drawings for them. Yes, you can have a drawing that has all the coordinates on it and an ordinate display. But what they really want is the raw data to just feed into the robotics system. And so what you're seeing is the support for it's an ISO standard that's forthcoming for master connection files, which basically has all the MBD data that the welders need to automate that downstream. And so I know there's a session on QIF and there's a session on a bunch of other standards that are going to kind of emerge, but we're really deep into figuring out how to drive that automation. And so, what I get worried about a little bit is like, okay, how widely adopted, are we? What's holding us back? And there clearly are going to be some companies that just do, basic things, and MBD is not, largely critical, and that's acceptable. Others might say, look, I make sheet metal. cabinets, and the sheet metal's made in Mexico and a low-cost provider on tooling that doesn't care about MVDs, and they really only just need the drawing. I mean, that's a supply chain thing. But to just kind of, in proportionality, kind of understand, where you all sit on this one. And the next one, I'm just waiting for this one to level off. This is where we need to behave a little, because I'm going to let you express your frustration. And you can type it in your own words. Since it's anonymous, career-limiting things are a little bit harder to trace in this. I've seen people drop emojis in here. Be sensitive to the audience. There's some emojis that probably shouldn't come up. It's interesting. Give it just another hot minute here. How about you all? Is this insightful? I don't know if it's going to win culture or people or Creo Plus. There it goes. I saw that on my side. All right, I think we've kind of leveled out here a little bit. Some things moving around. Yeah, my screen's too small, so I'm not in on the joke. We'll find out here in a little bit. All right. So I'm going to pivot real quick, and in the 10, 15 minutes I have left here, what I really want to talk about is a little bit more on the software requirements, digital thread side of things. And so, yeah, Jim mentioned last night that we acquired Codebeamer about a year and a half ago. And what we were profoundly informed about when we went to the automotive companies was just how they're using it compared to like how they're using Integrity. I mean, it was really mind-boggling to see, in a safety-critical environment, with agile working methods and so forth, how they were truly reimagining, what engineering and software looked like, and how that ultimately for them needs to extend into the product development, the hardware side. And when I say hardware, it doesn't matter if it's electrical, hydraulic, like the more physical attributes rather than the software-driven ones. And back in October, we said, well, if Windchill can do platform management, if you will, there's a version of that called product line engineering where there's variability in software as well. So for example, does your vehicle have autonomous driving or not? Does it have adaptive cruise control or not? And based on the features that go into a product, those requirements have a bunch of switches, just like platform options and variants have in Windchill. And so we said, well, Pure Variants, surprisingly, is in a large number of the same customers. In fact, even more so, because aerospace and defense customers that depend on Windchill are also doing product line engineering and Pure Variants. So that's kind of a win-win. We're going to put those together, not Pure Variants just with Codebeamer, but also say, okay, there's a product line management opportunity alongside Windchill as well. But that's not agile enough. Like, there's a working method thing inside of here too. Like, if you really think like, how does PTC deliver the volume of software that we do? One of the most radical changes we made about 10 years ago was just the adoption of the way that we went from waterfall to agile and all the continuous testing and integration we have. I mean, we run hundreds of thousands of tests now on Creo and Windchill and FlexPLM and ServiceMax and so forth every time the developers are checking the code in so that we can reduce the burden on QA. And the hard part is hardware's hard, because hardware often has a lot of test lab stuff, and so how do we diminish the need to do that, but still move like software people have been attributed to? So the software folks have an advantage that the hardware folks haven't yet figured out. And so if you think about the linearity here from like a less flexible to more flexible perspective, in hardware we like to do a lot of reuse. We like to do a lot of the architecture, and in software, like code changes are virtually free and they can move pretty quick. If we think about platforms and agility, like some of our customers, they never actually reuse anything, especially if they're using contract manufacturers for high-tech electronics. Next year's model is better than this year, and the reuse is inconsequential from the supplier's perspective. And so I'm going to kind of build this out. And so, if I were to put our products in quadrants here a little bit, Codebeamer and Onshape and Creo Plus now, because Creo Plus we can do some of that software magic and multi-user collaboration, can now lean a little bit more on the agile side of the fence here. And certainly Windchill, we want to have managed platforms, and Pure Systems, I just mentioned, manages the platform aspects as well. But if we kind of can connect them all together, can we give you all the tools to really implement Agile in a full engineering discipline perspective, meaning not just the software, but kind of change the working methodologies inside the company. And so one of the challenges that I think our customers face is, look, our velocities of change in the different lines of technology in the company, they're not a well-oiled gear mesh, if you will. We have different time cycles. Like software can do weekly sprints if they want to, but hardware might be on monthly. Other systems might be on twice a month. And so we're looking at it and saying, well, is there a way to kind of line up the cadence, or as one of our customers said, the agile drumbeat? Could you have an agile drumbeat that says, hey, it doesn't matter what speed you're at, but every 4 weeks, we're going to make sure like we can do a full integration test of everything that's in there. And so this is where I'm going to take the digital product traceability track. So for those of you that are saying, hey, how do my requirements kind of map into my parts in Windchill? We absolutely have a lot of work to do in there, but now to make it a little bit more elaborate, like how do we really do all of the sprint management and the planning and the orchestration? So if you think about it, you're going to have various different components and various different subsystems that have different needs. We can kind of plan those out between Windchill and Codebeamer, do the impact analysis, but then ultimately dispatch the work. But here's the real kicker, is how do we bring to y'all the ability to do that continuous integration, continuous test? So can we use ANSYS simulation in the loop? Every time an engineer makes a change, the test case says this is the simulation that supports that, pass, fail. And so just like software, we want to include more capabilities for you all to kind of drive more productivity. This is easily a half hour to a 45-minute demo, so I can't do it here. But for those that are interested, I'll stick around afterwards, and we can kind of share some ideas, and I can kind of follow up with you after. But that's a real big thing that we're working on this year, is to say, can we bring Agile closer and start crushing those waterfalls? Now, I made a comment about searching and Gen AI early on, and we haven't put a press release out because all the press releases say, I'm researching generative AI. And I'm like, yeah, no crap. If you're a technology company, you probably should. I don't need a press release for that. What I want to do is find productive value for you all. And so the things in green are things that are in our products right now. And so we're not going to be yet another Gen AI platform company. It's not interesting to us to be an AI platform. You can buy enough AI technology from everybody else. What I think our customers have told us time and again, we love it when it's productive value inside the product, solving immediate needs. And yes, if it can integrate to some of that other stuff, great, let's do that too. So the stuff in green are things that we have. Like we do, the generative AI that's in Creo is a completely different animal from OpenAI from a GPT perspective, right? It's not pre-trained on anybody's data. Your IP's not leaking. So we have a very IP-centric, aspect to how we're going to tackle AI here, meaning none of y'all are going to benefit from some of your competitors' data, moving from through PTC, right? So it's quite encapsulated, and I'll show you an example of that. The stuff in gray are things that we're working on. And in the UX lab, I think the schedule's full, but if you twist our arm, we can kind of show you some stuff. And again, we can kind of meet after as well. We're working on a lot of Gen AI stuff, and I'll show you some of that. But one of the ones Jim alluded to yesterday was with Vuforia. Because we know what's in the model, we know where things are in the world when we're looking at it. So this Volvo engine, people have seen this before, but what you're seeing is something slightly different, which is, the AR is really guiding you around the engine where you need to look. And normally we say, hey, operator, can you look for this cap? Can you look for this thing? Can you look for that? It can actually run so fast that you and I can't actually see what it's looking for, but yet it's able to see it. And in fact, sometimes we have a few where we just leave the cap a little bit off. So it's not a coordinate measuring machine, but if it's noticeable enough, it says, hey, that kind of looks like a problem. And so the idea to even automate to this level, to take the models that you're putting into Creo, give some AI that allows you to take pictures and videos, kind of augment that in, and then train on how to do like end-of-line inspection types of use cases, right? Well, what we said is, well, geez, if we could flip that around, could we do something that people absolutely hate doing, which is classifying data? Like, people hate classification, straight up. I don't care if it's wind chill, take your pick. One of the use cases that never dies is part reuse. And it's just hard because, number one, nobody wants to do it. It's boring as heck. And so are there ways to use AI to look at things? And I'm using the literal word look now, basically turning our computer vision engine around to now look inside the database and say, these things look similar. Okay, I got it. 12 millimeter bolts and 1/2 inch bolts are going to look the same. We're going to have some challenges there. So we also have to augment it with some data, metadata. And that metadata might be supplier, it might be quality, because two parts that are the same that have two different suppliers might not be equal. And so how do we enrich the way that we do the AI there as well? And then give you tools to say, yeah, now I can do it. And that's just a stepping stone. Because now if we can classify data that way, what other things can we do with it? Could we do export control classification as an example? Because now we can look at other characteristics. So tease that to say, this is in the queue. So we're now in research area of like things that are forthcoming here. So everything you're going to see from here out is things that we need your input on so that we can make the product better. But these two guys, do they need any explanation? One Satya and the other one is Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA. So at Ignite, they made some profound statements. And one was, generative AI is the single most significant computing technology. It dwarfs everything that came before it. The PC, the web-based UI, you go right on down the list. It's bigger than web and mobile. That's profound in and of its own right. And then Jensen said something I thought was pretty interesting, which is he said, look, at first, like the big companies, Facebook, Google, they had it. And then OpenAI said, oh, here's a cool way to do it. Fastest app growth ever, in terms of getting to 100 million users in 5 days. It was crazy. But he said, look, we're entering the third wave right now, which is Microsoft and everybody so quickly productionized the ability to get access to it that enterprises and boards alike are saying, how can we drive productive value? Because there's a little metric out there that says, hey, if you use Copilot in software development, you could be 20, 30, 50% more productive. Now, I don't know if the 50% is on a per day basis. It's probably out of the 2-3 hours that you write code, you might be a little bit more productive. But the idea that I can get more productivity, profound productivity, is not lost on our boards of directors, all of them. That's why they're all trying to figure out what's the biggest use case that's out there. And how you choose to interpret McKinsey's data is entirely your choice. But the one thing that I kind of gravitate towards is the top 4-ish use cases land in the realm of the people in this room. It's software development, which is kind of obvious. That's the most earliest use case. It's customer operations. And so when I show you ServiceMax, the idea that a service tech can get first-line help without having to wait 4 hours for the expert to wake up on the other side of the continent is a big advantage. And then to be able to ask questions about the asset in ways that the UI just doesn't express. Because in the end, what I think it is we just really want to have a conversation with our data. If I could do that, and I actually took a class at Harvard, don't tell them I used GPT to take the class. You have to know your material if you do that. But it was amazing to have this conversation buddy in that moment to really go through and battle test your assumptions. And I think that's what our customers want to do in Windchill, and Codebeamer, and ThingWorx, and ServiceMax, and all the data-centric products we have. It'll be a little different in Creo, and we'll eventually kind of talk about that. But what you're seeing here is these are just prototype UIs. These are not how they're going to show up in the product, but really using GPT technology in Codebeamer and Windchill to start allowing people to ask questions about their products. And the more data we can unlock in the way that you're all creating and managing it, the more intelligent conversations we can have. And so we are collaborating with Microsoft deeply on this. Even asking questions eventually you're going to want to not just have it with Windchill and Codebeamer. You're going to want some supply chain data from ERP being mixed into this so that you can really start to ask super insightful questions. And so the interesting question from Microsoft was, what did an integration like that look like? Because I think you would all look at me a little bit silly if I said, hey, would you export all this stuff from SAP and stick it into this PTC thing just to get the value out of it? And I don't know that that's going to scale for customers. And ThingWorks is the pretty interesting use case too, because there's so many different ways that we can represent data on the left-hand side here, that if you just start to ask your asset questions about the data, we can reconstruct different ways to spit that out. So you're gonna see the UI on the left side will kind of readapt based on the data coming out of those assets. And the UI on the right is what you're seeing in ServiceMax are two different screens. One is a scheduling screen where the tech is saying, hey, I'm trying to fit this in. Can we rearrange my schedule to move this to here, and just automating that so they don't need a schedule planner to do it. And then similarly, when the tech shows up, what is it about the asset so that it can be fully prepared to actually service that? And to rave reviews, the technicians are actually really happy with kind of the interesting responses that it gives them and the accuracy. And that's actually a big thing for us, is just making sure the accuracy is relevant. Because if you got an 80% accurate thing, I don't know, show of hands, who wants an 80% accurate pacemaker? Who wants to be 80% accurate landing on Mars? Who would like to have an 80% accurate adaptive cruise or autonomous drive? I don't know anybody in the room that would say I'm cool with 80%, but we want to raise the bar high enough. But I still think this is not autonomous, meaning people are going to be in the loop for a long time. It's really a decision support tool that should unlock a lot of data for you. 2 slides remain. Jim mentioned Apple Vision Pro, and we're handcuffed to talk about it till February 2nd. So when a politician says, I cannot confirm nor deny, I cannot confirm nor deny that we have these. It is not like other devices, and I think it will fundamentally change some of the collaboration ideas, that we can come up with. I'll leave it be at that. If some of you got a pre-order, there's enough stuff on the web that you can kind of figure out what might possibly be happening, but February 2nd is like the date that I think it'll become a little bit more public. And I think the machine in the front, it's a machine that I had a design from Rockwell on, and you can do photorealistic rendering and some other stuff. But did anybody notice how the Apple marketing team actually has no idea how engineering works? Like, they think we're all Cro-Magnon with our paper-based file systems. Did you notice that? I'm like, you trolls. Like, you had no idea. The design world is locked in paper, and we will unleash the Apple Vision Pro on you. And I'm like, we gotta have a conversation with them. But okay, I'm inspired by the artwork on the wall. I'm not too cool about the guy checking into the drawer. Let's just say, I've been working for 24 years. Jim's 30 years trying to eliminate drawings, and here we are. By the way, they don't want you to call it a VR device, XR device, MR device, any of that stuff. They want you to call it a spatial computing device. And this is some spatial computing work that we've been doing since 2017. And we continue to expand it and expand it and expand it. And yes, it's got AR. What you're seeing in the inset in the bottom right is the first-person view on the factory floor. This happens to be a PTC office. And in the web screen behind it is some remote servicer's field of view. And you can see that he already dropped a PDF. I said he because I know who did it. Into the field of view so the tech can actually read it. We can do guiding. We can do all sorts of other really interesting computer vision analytics. You're going to see that here in a second. So when, we're seeing people kind of interacting in space, for those that are doing like a Muramudi, you could do, body pose tracking. So we can say, hey, are the ergonomics, so you see it switch from red to green. And again, you can do where the body pose is, how you're moving. And so now that idea of saying, hey, in NPM Link we have a process plan, but what's the reality? What's the absolute reality in space? Because the process plan is void of space for the most part. Now, granted, you could use the SrinSoft integration for the factory to get the factory floor plan in and start doing some of the more spatial planning aspects, but reality sometimes doesn't reflect what you see in a flowchart or a engineering print. And so here you're seeing that we're now able to kind of break down and do some time analysis. And so over time, some of these things, we think will kind of be in the technology. So this is in the research area, if interesting. If any of this is interesting, feel free to hit me up. And this is it. I want to leave you with, in the transition from Jim to Neil. I've actually, gotten to know Neil quite well over the year and a half that he's actually been at PTC. I'm pretty enthusiastic about, the change. I'm actually very sad that Jim's leaving just at a personal level because I've known him almost the entire time I've been at PTC. I've worked with him for 15, 17 years at this point. And so he's been just an incredible mentor. But, Here's the thing, the management team at PTC is also seasoned by Jim, and none of that's changing. Like, Neil's not here to like transform the company. He just needs to run it as it currently is, and we'll, you know, kind of creatively keep it going. And so this is the statement I make, that you're in good hands. Quite frankly, like has never been better. Like, Jim's not exiting on the low, he's exiting on the ultra high, and we intend to keep it that way. If Jim were here, I'd say my opening and close were a double entendre, because I'd want to thank him for everything that he's done for all of us and myself and the PTC colleagues here and the partners. But I also want to thank you, because I think a lot of what we do and benefit from comes from the great collaboration that all of us in the room have with you. And I hope what we do together makes a difference in the world. So appreciate your time, everybody. Thank you.